Welcome to British Focus, your go-to channel for sharp analysis and no-nonsense commentary on UK politics. Today, we dive into a question that's been on everyone's mind. What's the point of Prime Minister's questions these days? Week after week, it seems like Keir Starmer dodges tough questions and skirts around giving direct answers. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister faces intense scrutiny but often responds with remarks completely unrelated to what was asked. Has PMQs lost its purpose, or is this just politics as usual? In this video, we'll unpack three key moments from this week's PMQs that truly define the session. From Starmer being called out to the Prime Minister sidestepping pressing issues, we'll explore how the session devolved into a spectacle of political theatre. Not only will we break these moments down in real time, but we'll also take a closer look at the latest developments shaping the nation's political landscape. Before we get started, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to British Focus, and join our fast-growing community for more insightful content on everything British politics. Let's dive right in.
Mr. Speaker, in what is supposed to be a honeymoon period for a new government, the Prime Minister has sacked his Chief of Staff, forced his City Minister and Transport Secretary to resign, whilst Number 10 has been briefing against the Pensions Secretary, Home Secretary and Education Secretary. Is it not time that the Prime Minister accepts that the root causes at the heart of this government are with him, not them?
We just won a landslide victory, and we've got a massive majority. We're getting on with the job. And Mr. Speaker, I don't think we saw. Look at the sheer number of ministers that they got through on a yearly basis, causing instability in every conceivable department.
Paul Davies.
Mortgages have hit 5%. Borrowing is billions above forecast. Retail sales have slumped. Does the Prime Minister still believe the Chancellor is doing a good job?
I thought she was just reading out their last record.
Final question, Mark Turmit.
When it comes to his budget, which raised taxes, raised borrowing and raised public spending as a strategy for economic growth, when is the Prime Minister going to accept the words of the Labour Prime Minister in the 1970s, who explained to a Labour conference that in all candour that option no longer exists, and that the only way to obtain sustained economic growth will be by cutting taxes and cutting regulation?
Prime Minister.
He must have missed recent reports. The ONS has just said that we've got the highest investment for 19 years. The PwC have just said that this is the second best place to invest in the world. The IMF have just upgraded growth, now saying we're predicted to be the fastest growing major European economy. Wages are up and inflation is down. That's after just 6 months.
In recent financial developments, UK borrowing costs rose unexpectedly to a staggering £17.8 billion in December, catching many by surprise. This marked a 25% increase compared to economists' predictions and was £10.1 billion higher than the same period last year, making it the largest December borrowing figure in 4 years. Despite this concerning trend, Chancellor Rachel Reeves has maintained an optimistic outlook on the country's financial health, pointing to the foundations laid in the October budget. Reeves continues to express confidence in the measures introduced to stabilise the economy, even as external pressures mount. This unexpected surge in borrowing has placed significant pressure on the government to reassess its fiscal strategies, with critical decisions looming on potential budget cuts ahead of the summer spending review. The sharp increase in borrowing highlights broader challenges in managing the UK's economic landscape, particularly in light of volatile global markets and domestic fiscal uncertainties. Analysts have pointed out that December's borrowing spike was primarily driven by high debt interest costs, which accounted for a significant portion of the deficit. In addition, a one-off expenditure on military housing, totaling £1.7 billion, added further weight to the public sector's financial burden. According to data released midweek, public sector net borrowing reached its unexpected peak largely due to an £8.3 billion interest payment on government debt. This figure represented the third highest December total on record, underscoring the growing challenges posed by rising interest rates and inflation. The Bank of England's efforts to combat inflation with successive interest rate hikes have inadvertently increased the cost of servicing government debt, creating a precarious balancing act for policymakers. The high interest payments highlight the double-edged sword of using monetary tools to stabilize inflation while managing the fallout on fiscal health. This comes at a time when the UK is navigating economic headwinds on multiple fronts. The December borrowing figures have sparked renewed debates over the government's fiscal policy, with critics questioning whether the current trajectory is sustainable. Some argue that Reeves' optimistic rhetoric does not align with the stark realities of rising public debt and the need for urgent corrective measures. Others, however, suggest that short-term borrowing spikes should not overshadow the broader structural reforms that have been implemented, pointing to the importance of patience in achieving long-term financial stability. The unexpected increase in borrowing has also raised concerns about the government's ability to meet its self-imposed fiscal rules. Reeves has reiterated her commitment to these rules, which include paying for day-to-day spending through tax receipts and reducing debt as a share of gross domestic product. However, the headroom for meeting these targets has narrowed considerably, as Reeves herself acknowledged in recent statements. The Chancellor emphasized that these fiscal rules remain the bedrock of economic stability, adding that adhering to them is critical for maintaining market confidence and protecting the UK's financial standing on the global stage. The spending review scheduled for the summer is expected to be one of the most rigorous in recent history, with every line of government expenditure set to face intense scrutiny. Reeves has stated that her team will be looking to root out waste and ensure that taxpayers' money is spent productively. The review will involve examining long-standing inefficiencies and identifying areas where cuts can be made without undermining key public services. The government's focus, according to Reeves, is on maintaining fiscal discipline while fostering economic growth, a delicate balance that will undoubtedly require difficult trade-offs. Economists have highlighted that the December borrowing spike is symptomatic of deeper issues within the UK's economic framework. Volatility in the bond market has played a significant role in driving up borrowing costs, with yields on UK government bonds reaching levels not seen since the late 1990s. The Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, had initially forecast a lower borrowing figure of £14.1 billion for December, underscoring just how far off the mark the actual numbers were. This has led to growing concerns about the reliability of economic forecasting models in the current climate, where geopolitical instability and fluctuating markets make predictions increasingly challenging. The Chancellor's confidence, however, is bolstered by recent positive developments in certain sectors of the economy. Reeves has pointed to indicators such as wage growth and declining inflation as signs that the government's economic strategy is beginning to yield results. She also highlighted the importance of her two-pronged fiscal approach, which prioritizes reducing unnecessary expenditure while creating an environment conducive to business growth. Speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Reeves reiterated her belief in lower taxes, less regulation, and a pro-business agenda as the cornerstone of the UK's recovery plan. Still, the challenges ahead are formidable. The high borrowing costs in December have intensified calls for fiscal restraint, with some experts warning that further tax increases may be necessary to bridge the gap. Elliot Jordan, a senior economist at Pantheon Macroeconomics, suggested that the government might consider backloading spending reductions towards the end of the fiscal year to mitigate immediate shocks. He also speculated that additional tax hikes could be introduced in the October budget, adding further complexity to the government's efforts to balance the books. Despite these difficulties, Reeves remains adamant that the UK's financial future is secure. She has framed the recent challenges as part of a broader adjustment process, arguing that temporary setbacks should not overshadow the government's progress in achieving long-term goals. Her assertion that we have wiped the slate clean reflects a commitment to fiscal discipline, even as external pressures test the resilience of her policies. Critics, however, are less convinced, pointing to the record levels of borrowing as evidence that the government's approach may need significant recalibration. The December figures have also had a ripple effect on public sentiment, with rising costs and economic uncertainty weighing heavily on households. The pressure on Reeves and her team to deliver tangible results is immense, as the public grows increasingly skeptical of the government's ability to manage the economy effectively. The upcoming months will be crucial in determining whether the current strategies are sufficient to navigate these turbulent times or if more drastic measures will be required. In the meantime, the Chancellor has sought to reassure the public that the government remains focused on its primary mission of delivering growth and stability. Darren Jones, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, echoed this sentiment, stating that economic stability is vital for our #1 mission of delivering growth. He emphasized the importance of maintaining an iron grip on public finances and pledged to conduct the most thorough spending review in nearly 2 decades. These efforts, Jones claimed, will ensure that every penny of taxpayers' money is spent wisely and productively. As the government prepares for the next fiscal event in March, all eyes will be on how it plans to address the challenges posed by rising borrowing costs, inflation, and market volatility. The stakes are high, and the decisions made in the coming months will have far-reaching implications for the UK's economic trajectory. Whether Reeves and her team can rise to the occasion remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: the road ahead will not be easy. The Office for National Statistics recently revealed that economists had initially predicted December's borrowing to be around £14.1 billion, a figure that turned out to be significantly underestimated. The actual borrowing surged to £17.8 billion, with a substantial portion of this increase stemming from an £8.3 billion debt interest payment. This payment represented the third highest total for the month of December on record, underscoring the growing financial strain faced by the UK government. Compounding this issue, an additional £1.7 billion was spent on the repurchasing of military homes, further inflating the public sector borrowing figure. These figures highlight a growing challenge for the government, as rising borrowing costs threaten to destabilise the delicate balance of the UK's fiscal framework. Chancellor Rachel Reeves has acknowledged the difficulty of navigating these turbulent financial waters. In a recent statement, she candidly admitted that the headroom available to meet the fiscal targets laid out in the economic forecast's final year is shrinking rapidly. Despite this, Reeves has stood firm in her commitment to these targets, describing the fiscal rules as the bedrock of economic stability and a vital foundation for maintaining the country's financial credibility. The challenges extend beyond the immediate pressures of December's borrowing. Over the current financial year, UK government borrowing has reached £9.9 billion, a figure that is £8.9 billion higher than the same period last year. This marks a record level of borrowing outside the peak of the pandemic, illustrating the gravity of the situation. Notably, this figure is also £4 billion higher than the £15.9 billion forecast made by the Office for Budget Responsibility, OBR, further emphasising the gap between projections and reality. The underlying factors driving this surge in borrowing are multifaceted. One of the primary contributors has been the volatility in the UK bond market, which has pushed up borrowing costs to levels not seen in decades. Higher bond yields have placed additional strain on government finances, as the cost of servicing debt rises sharply. This has created a knock-on effect, raising concerns about the government's ability to adhere to its fiscal rules and maintain economic stability. At the same time, weaker growth projections and stubbornly high inflation have eroded the financial headroom available to policymakers, making it increasingly difficult to manage public finances effectively. The strain on the fiscal framework has sparked widespread debate among economists and political commentators alike. Many argue that the current trajectory of rising debt and borrowing costs is unsustainable and that urgent corrective measures are needed. Some experts have pointed to the need for a comprehensive review of public spending, suggesting that significant cuts may be unavoidable if the government is to regain control of its finances. Others have highlighted the importance of structural reforms aimed at boosting economic growth and reducing reliance on debt-driven spending. The Chancellor has been quick to defend her approach, emphasising the long-term benefits of adhering to fiscal discipline. Speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Reeves outlined her vision for the UK's economic recovery, focusing on lower taxes, reduced regulation, and creating a business-friendly environment. She argued that these measures would lay the groundwork for sustainable growth while ensuring that public finances remain on a stable footing. Reeves also reiterated her commitment to her 2 key fiscal rules: paying for day-to-day spending through tax receipts and reducing debt as a share of GDP. These principles, she asserted, are crucial for maintaining market confidence and protecting the UK's position as a competitive global economy. Despite these reassurances, the situation remains precarious. The recent rise in borrowing has fueled criticism from opposition parties, who have accused the government of failing to adequately address the root causes of the fiscal challenges. Critics have also questioned the effectiveness of the government's economic strategy, arguing that it has failed to deliver meaningful improvements in key areas such as productivity and income growth. The pressure is now on Reeves and her team to deliver tangible results in the face of mounting skepticism. Economists have warned that the government's fiscal targets may be at risk unless decisive action is taken. Elliot Jordan, a senior UK economist at Pantheon Macroeconomics, has suggested that the government may need to consider backloading spending reductions towards the end of the forecast year to minimise immediate disruptions. He also noted that further tax increases are a likely possibility in the October budget, as the government seeks to bridge the gap between revenues and expenditures. These measures, while necessary, are likely to be unpopular and could face significant political resistance. The ripple effects of the December borrowing figures have extended beyond the realm of government finances, with implications for the broader economy and public sentiment. Rising costs and economic uncertainty have placed additional pressure on households, many of whom are already grappling with the impact of inflation and stagnant wage growth. This has heightened expectations for the government to act decisively, as the public grows increasingly wary of the state of the economy and its potential impact on their livelihoods. At the same time, there are glimmers of hope that the situation may stabilize in the months ahead. Recent data has shown signs of improvement in certain areas, such as wage growth and a slight decline in inflation. These developments have provided a degree of reassurance that the government's economic strategy is beginning to bear fruit, even if progress remains uneven. The Chancellor has pointed to these indicators as evidence that the UK is on the right track, urging patience and perseverance as the government works to address the challenges ahead. The upcoming spending review, scheduled for the summer, will be a critical juncture for the government. Reeves has promised a thorough examination of every line of government expenditure, with the aim of rooting out inefficiencies and ensuring that taxpayers' money is spent wisely. This process, she has said, will be guided by a commitment to fiscal discipline and a determination to deliver value for money. The stakes are high, and the decisions made during the review will have far-reaching implications for the UK's economic trajectory. As the government prepares for its next fiscal event in March, all eyes will be on how it plans to address the challenges posed by rising borrowing costs, inflation, and market volatility. The outcome of these efforts will be closely watched, both domestically and internationally, as the UK navigates one of the most challenging economic periods in recent history. Whether Reeves and her team can rise to the occasion remains to be seen, but one thing is clear: the path to economic stability will require difficult decisions, bold leadership, and a steadfast commitment to the principles of sound fiscal management.